Welcome everybody to Stop Burning Your AdWords Budget. This is simple optimization tactics to make your spend more effective. This is being recorded and we will post the recording with the slides both on our site, and it will stay on this GoToWebinar link that you registered with so that you can access it afterwards. Quick introductions. I'm Luciano Pesci. I'm the founder and director of the Utah Community Research Group at the University of Utah, where I teach microecon, stats, data analytics, and American economic development. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Imperatos. We're a team of data analysts, data scientists, economists who find actionable business intelligence using marketing analytics like AdWords that we're going to cover today and agile research methods so that we can help our clients beat their competition. I am joined today by two co-hosts. The first is Tyler Calder. He is the Director of Analytics here at Imperatos, where he leads our Advanced Concepts team. They are tasked with automating analytics, insights, and reporting for our clients. And I'm also joined by Savannah Patterson of iFreedom Direct. She's a BI analyst who oversees and mines the company's very large data ecosystem in support of their marketing, sales, and operational strategy goals. There are 4 parts to the webinar today. I will be covering the first 2, the power of visualization and controlling for time. Tyler will take over and talk about game theory and agile research as a way to add information that's not available in your AdWords data. And then Savannah will talk in detail about iFreedom's experience with AdWords. They've been doing it for 10 years. And what that's been like and why they took a data-driven approach and what kind of impact that's been having for them. So there are 4 sections. Again, if you have any questions at any time, please just put them in the chat window, or if you see it on your end, it might say that it's the questions. I will answer those as I can during the webinar, but I will also give us a good chunk of time at the end to answer and talk about anything that you'd like. So the 4 sections, let me go through them in detail. The first is about visualization. I'm going to point out that most people are visual learners, and all data, this is not just true of AdWords, but all data is best expressed through visualization rather than through summary tables and numbers. The second part of what I'm going to talk about today is the effectiveness of AdWords depends on time. So day, hour, week, month, year, all of those things are just as important. The timing is just as important as the spend bid, the quality score. And then the third section will be on game theory and agile research. And this is, AdWords is built on game theory by an economist. And Tyler will get into that, which means that if you can use some of the game theory strategies that were inevitably used to build it, it's going to put you at a greater position of advantage. And some of that information, because it doesn't derive in AdWords data itself, has to come from other research methods. And we are a proponent at Imperatos of agile research, which is something you do quickly and over time in short intervals. If you're familiar with agile development, you have 2 weeks, then you have a scrum, and then you go and work for another 2 weeks, you have another scrum, and this keeps everybody focused and it keeps it in small digestible chunks. And then we'll go into a case study where these methods have actually been applied. So the power of visualization. This is something that has been greatly aided by technology. 10 years ago, I couldn't have even had this conversation with you about visualization. And why it's important is because people do not learn by reading or doing in the same way that they learn from seeing. The vast majority of people, 2 out of every 3 that you meet, will learn best by processing a visualization or some kind of visual cue. This runs counter to traditional practice. I mean, many reports are just page after page of text with some charts laid in. And that's really an ineffective way for any audience because, again, 2 out of the 3 of them, just on average, aren't going to be able to process that the same way that they could a very simple and elegant visualization. And this is something that's actually easy to do now because of technology. So there's a range of do-it-yourself visualization tools that have come onto the market. Here are only 4. There are literally thousands. And if you just go online and search AdWords dashboard, what you'll find is all kinds of companies that will take your data and they'll visualize it in very quick ways, but you have to usually do it. You have to guide it. You have to tell it what you're looking for. You have to understand what you're hunting for. And if you already know that, then there's a bunch of open source options. 3 of the 4 here listed on this slide are open source. So R is an open source programming language. It's now the 6th most popular programming language in the world. I use it at the University of Utah where I teach. In the stats class I teach, in the microecon class I teach, we use R. It has a little bit of a learning curve, but because it's open source, it's free. And there's an add-on called R Shiny that allows you to build dashboards with it. But it also has a massive community that supports it. So if you ever have issues, you can usually just go onto Google and search for them and find people who've been talking at length about how to do these different things in R. The next step up from that, which is a paid step, and some of you may have actually used Tableau before. I think Tableau is a really great, if you're going to go out and buy a dashboard tool, I think Tableau is one you should seriously look at because there is not much of a learning curve. It's not that expensive. I believe a yearly license is $1,000 or $1,500 for the first year, and then it's cheaper after that. It integrates very well with a lot of existing things. So if you're using AWS for any of your big data, you can, through Redshift, integrate straight to Tableau. And because it doesn't have a learning curve, this is great for existing analysts. So if you're an analyst right now at an organization and you're tasked with processing a lot of data for the purpose of visualization, Tableau is probably where you should start. But it does have a cost, and it is, again, a do-it-yourself. The next is Gephi. This is great for really big data sets. A lot of the fancy visualizations that you're seeing out on the web right now, whether they're in infographics or interactive data tables, it's probably either Gephi or D3. So both of these have significantly higher learning curves, and D3 you can't use effectively unless you're a Java programmer. So if you have a LAMP stack person, or you have somebody that knows Java, they should be able to navigate with D3. But the purpose of D3 versus something like R is with D3, you are now custom building your own dashboard because you've identified what information you're hoping to visualize. When it comes to Adwords specifically, the Adwords dashboard is a pretty good place to start. You can create bivariate or 2-variable visualizations pretty quickly. So you can do pivot tables, bar charts, line charts. But once you start to move beyond 2 variables, the visualizations get very, very difficult to make sense of. It's not very easy to control. It's hard to do multiple things, like using color as one of the ways to add a dimension. And so when I say higher dimensions here, that moving beyond Adwords requires something that can handle higher dimensions, that just means different variables. So this might be the clicks and the conversions and the cost and the campaign and the keyword. And what you want to look at is all of those things simultaneously. That's very, very hard to do in Adwords. The other really big limitation to any of these numerically based dashboards, and Adwords is still largely numerically based, it's aggregate values. And aggregate values put you at a big risk of missing deeper patterns. So outliers are a good example. Things that just are not typical, you might lose sight of, or you might believe that one campaign is being a lot more effective than it actually is just because you had one keyword or one advert that drove a ton of conversions, but the rest of that campaign failed miserably. So that's the danger of an outlier. The other is variability. Well, if you have 10 keywords for one campaign, and 3 are performing really well, 3 aren't performing well, and 4 are just kind of somewhere in the middle, again, in average, you're going to lose sight of that. So you don't get to see the variability across whatever metric you're looking at. And then the third problem, and this gets into a little bit of stats jargon, and I apologize because I really did try to find a non-jargony way to describe this, but multimodality. And what multimodality means is you have 2 different groups inside of that one metric, and you can't tell they're different because they get washed out in the average. So let me give you an example. And this is not an AdWords specific example, but I'm sure that all of you at some point have taken some kind of survey where they had a 0 to 10 scaled question, and it said, on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is I had a horrible experience and 10 is I had a great experience, how would you rate your experience? So let's just assume there's only 2 people. And for the first pair of people, let's say they both had an average experience. They put 5 each. Well, the average of those two people is 5. And that actually captures their experience perfectly. But what if one person had a terrible experience and marked 0, and another person had an incredible experience and marked 10? The average of their experience is 5 as well. Well, that's not true of anybody, because one person had a horrible experience and one person had a great experience. And so there's danger in averages, and the way that you get around this in statistical analysis as an analyst is you never just look at the average, you look at the average value, you look at the variability, the measure of spread, and then you plot it visually so that you can see if there are things like these multimodal groups. Because if multimodality exists, then what you have are two very separate groups who should be considered separately and should be analyzed separately. But the only way that you can do that really easily is to get the raw data, which Google has made it pretty easy. So if you go into your AdWords dashboard, you can create a report, and whatever report you're creating, so you're dragging and dropping all the boxes from the left to the side on the right, you're saying, I want clicks, I want conversions, I want cost. There is a download to CSV option, which will put all of those things as columns, and then you can see the rows of data. You need to be clear, and this is true of all data, AdWords included. You need to be clear what you're hoping to get out of it before you download one of these reports, or you'll just get meaningless insights. What do you need to know? Does it pertain at the campaign level, or is it at the keyword level? Is it tied to the wording of the adverts, the messaging? How is that affecting their performance? What about the cost? What about the time of day? If you start to figure out what you're hoping to accomplish, then you can create a report in AdWords that you're not going to rely on the visualization in AdWords, but because of the way it's set up, you build that report and then you download the data, and now you have what you'll need to move into something like R or to move into something like Tableau to start to visualize it. So let me give you an example of one of these. So this is a scatter plot visualization, x-axis, y-axis. There's really 4 things that are being shown here simultaneously because we're using color and we're also using size of these bubbles to express different things. So let me go through. This is, by the way, made in Tableau. So if you look at the y-axis, the vertical axis, so that's this one here, this is showing clicks. Okay, so the higher this goes, the more clicks that you're getting for that campaign and the campaigns that are being broken out by their keywords. And I'll explain that in a second. On the x-axis, you have conversions, and this is, of those clicks, how many converted. Now, you could never have a situation, and I maybe shouldn't say never, I guess you could have some data issues, but you can't have a situation where you have more conversions than you have clicks, but you can have more clicks than you have conversions. And so you need to pay attention to the scale. Note that this is jumping in increments of 200, while this is going in increments of 50. And in a traditional scatter plot, there would have just been a line that showed you some kind of overall performance, but we were able, because Tableau is built this way, and it's true of R-Shining, these other tools that I mentioned, but we can add other dimensions to this so that we're getting more impact from this one simple visualization. And again, the point of this visualization is to synthesize down all of these different things that are affecting performance. So right now we know that at the campaign level, we're trying to assess performance. Well, one of the things about a campaign that's very important are the different keywords that we're using. And so we have used campaigns based on color. So if you look at, this is the same campaign as this, but they had very different conversion rates and they had very different click rates. They also had very different cost, which is the size of the bubble. So keywords B, which is part of the same campaign as keywords A, cost significantly less and got a lot more conversions for the amount of clicks than you have keywords A that got a lot of clicks and lower conversions and at a higher cost. And so point of the visualization here, again, we see some outliers. Look at this keywords for this campaign. A lot of clicks, pretty good amount of conversions, very, very low cost. Over here we have higher conversions at lower clicks, but at a higher cost. And so now you have to start. The purpose of this visualization is not to give you the end goal. This is the first step. You're synthesizing 4 different dimensions that all speak to the quality of the campaign. well, why? What is going on? And that gets into the next, you have to start to drill down is what analysts will typically say. So now we're getting this 30,000 foot view. We're starting to understand which campaigns are performing well and which keywords within those campaigns are performing well and in a cost-effective way. Well, what is different between keywords A and keywords B? Could be the messaging. It could also be the time of day. And this is one that people don't pay a lot of attention to, but seasonality is in everything. If you work in any sort of retail, e-commerce organization, you know that all quarters of the year are not created equal. Most of the retail sales in the United States happen in the fourth quarter, in the final 3 months of the year. And at some organizations, the fourth quarter can represent 75% or more of their revenue. So understanding seasonality and the way in which time affects this is also very important. And it's one of the things that you have access to in Google AdWords so that you can get it through the data. Usually when we're talking about AdWords and AdWord performance, people are looking at what keywords did I use, what's my quality score, and what is my max bid. Those three things they do not solely define the success of a campaign. Who you're competing against is one, and that's what Tyler's going to get into in the next section. But time of day, month of the year, specific weeks, some data that we've seen, the third week of every month, things just perform better. And so if you're paying attention to these differences in performance visually, you'll start to see them. You can hunt down what's going on and why, and you can then change your spend so that you're not wasting it on times of day or days a week that have no impact relative to the others. And now I want to make an important statement here at this point, because the next section is going to get into this after we look at another visualization, which is all we're talking about are clicks and conversions. Whether or not that conversion was worth the cost is outside of AdWords. It is a strict raw aggregate number. So you could literally click yourself into bankruptcy by buying the wrong customer at the wrong time with the wrong keywords. And even though they're clicking and even though they're converting, in the end, it's not going to result in profitability for the company. And I'm an economist, and so I'm going to harp on this a couple times. The next section is on game theory, which is one of the main tools of economics. Not all customers are created equal, just like not all data is created equal. You need to know as you're buying these clients, there needs to be some validation process in there that I can understand this by day of month or month of year, but by campaigns, by keywords, who do I actually end up getting that was worth the effort? Okay, and we're going to get into that, but I wanted to point that out now because it is outside of even this visualization. So here's another visualization that uses 14 months of data. So we have 2 years here, 2015, 2016. All the months are here on the x-axis. The y-axis is now conversions. We're not looking at clicks anymore. We're just looking at conversions. And these are total amounts. So this month, January 2015, had almost 800 conversions. Where did they come from? From which campaigns? So by color coding the campaigns, we can start to see performance of the campaigns over time. When campaigns go away, you see a big change here, right? Campaign X in this period has many, many conversions. It kind of dwindles a little bit, it surges again, and then it switches. Well, we didn't even run that campaign in the last month of the year, and it was replaced by another campaign that performed at about the same level, and then we see this reverse again. There is no measure of cost in this right now. There is no measure of whether or not those conversions were profitable. But you can start to see, as far as your total conversions over time, how each different campaign is performing. And again, this is that 30,000 foot view where you start and you say, well, why did this campaign perform so much better in September than it did in July or June? Did we just put more money into it? Is that why we got the conversions? And so that would be another visualization that you'd start to drill down on after you have got this first overall assessment. Okay. Simple visualizations are just that. They're simple, which means They can pack a lot of information, but they usually fail to explain why. You understand what happened, but you might not understand why it happened. And then once you understand why it happened, you can start to shape success by feeding that information back into your bidding strategy. And this is where game theory comes up. And at this point, I am going to hand off the communication here for the next few slides to Tyler Calder of Imperatos.
All right, excuse me, I just had some trouble with the mute button, but like Luciano was saying before, looking at dashboards, looking at visualizations gives you a good idea of where you're at. But game theory is a tool. It's a branch of economics that we use to analyze decisions, analyze strategies, and situations where conflicting people or conflicting businesses are making decisions that impact one another. And like you said before, this is a whole entity, a whole discipline within economics. And so we're not going to go deep into what game theory is and how to actually perform a game theoretic analysis. But if you are really interested in learning about game theory, in learning about the different things that you can learn from it, there's a great course. It's from Yale. They provide it for free. You can watch a whole semester worth of game theory online and learn about that if it's something you're really interested. We posted a link in the chat if you want to take a look at that. It's the Econ 159 at Yale online course. So, like I said, game theory is it's a study of how people make choices and how they make decisions based on different strategies that they can have, especially when those strategies are conflicting with other people's, and that their end outcomes, the outcome that someone receives, is dependent on other people's choices. The big thing that we want to talk about with AdWords and why it's so important to AdWords, as Luciano pointed out earlier, is that Google modeled the AdWords auction off of game theory. They hired Hal Varian, who at the time he was the dean of the UC Berkeley School of Information. He's an economist that was teaching at UC Berkeley, founded the School of Information there, and they hired him to consult. And now he's actually the chief economist at Google. But they hired him in 2002 to consult in how to develop and create the AdWords auctions so that it would benefit them the most. And as I'll see over and over again, game theory is a tool that we can use to make sure that you're not just reacting to the market, but that you're actually shaping the market into the way that you want it to work for yourself. So Google, they're going to start selling AdWords. They're going to start advertising. One thing that they're not going to want is they don't want people who are going to be bidding on AdWords to collude with each other to start just bidding really low prices. People who run auctions, and especially an auction like AdWords, they want people to bid their actual value, to bid the highest amount that they're willing to pay. And so, in order to do that, they used game theory to create a system where the best option for someone was to bid their highest, the highest value that they're willing to bid, because what you bid, as you'll know, is what you bid in AdWords has little to do with what you actually pay. People who bid higher with an equal quality score will place higher and end up paying less on their AdWords. So that's just one example of how game theory works and how it's being used for AdWords, and how so what I really want to go into right now is how if you take game theory and start using it to plan out your strategies and actually start thinking forward and strategizing about how to really place your campaigns, make sure that you're using the right keywords, that you're using the right bidding strategy, and that your quality score, you're making sure that your ads are formatted for the right way, depending from keyword to keyword and from competitor to competitor. So things that you're going to need are, first of all, you need to understand own payoffs. You need to understand what is your paycheck, what's going to bring the value to your company. So you need to understand what we call the expected value of your leads, And Secondly, you got to know, for game theory, you got to understand your competitors, because game theory is all about you're not acting in isolation. You make decisions that influence other people, and they make decisions that influence you. So you've got to understand what they're doing. You got to understand what their spend is, who they are, and ideally you'd like to know their revenue and their production structure. Now we know that these are some things that aren't necessarily readily available. You can't just go to your competition and say, well, how much money are you making? How are you actually doing your production process? But there is a lot of information that you can go out and get there on your clients. You can go to their website, see what they're offering, and see, how many clients. A lot of times, some of your competitors will put on that, oh, we serve 200 clients, 300 clients, and they'll put up their entire staff, and you can see how many people they have working for them. And you can start gauging what their spend is, what their revenue is, what their structure is like. And once you have these values defined, and I apologize, I didn't define expected value very much. So the expected value is going to be really the value that any lead could generate. So say you're selling, all you sell is, a car for $1,000. You sell a bunch of cars for $1,000. Any lead that you generate, the most that they would be able to, most money they're going to buy from you is $1,000. And if you know how many of those leads, it's the numbers game of like, well, 50% of our leads purchase, then you know that your expected value from any lead is about $500. We're going to go into that a little more in the next slide. One note about when I was talking about competitive intelligence, finding stuff about your competitor. A lot of times too, if you can't find this information, you can often assume what we call symmetry to yourself. In other words, you can assume that they're bearing the same costs, that they have the same structure as you. And this is especially true in very established and competitive markets, that they're probably operating the same way that you are. They've got the same cost structure as you, and you can use that to start generating what their strategies are. So, like I said, getting to know your expected value, this is something that we talked about a lot, and Luciano was talking about, is that you can click yourself to death, you can click yourself into bankruptcy if you don't understand the value of those customers. If your customers only generate $1,000 of revenue and you only get 50% of your leads generating revenue, then you should never be willing to spend more than $500 at all in acquiring those customers. It's the same way through AdWords. If anyone who comes in through AdWords only generates $30, $40, $50 of revenue for you, you shouldn't be willing to spend more than $30, $50 of revenue on that person. Another thing, so when you're trying to find out this information about your expected value, the place that we always like to start, and the place that you should start, is in your CRM, because that's the place that's keeping track of your sales information. It's keeping track of your leads, who's purchased, what they've purchased, and it's there that you can start dividing up into those groups and start applying those visualizations that Luciano was talking about to your CRM to see, are there different groups. And one thing we like to always talk about in Veritas, and it's been shown through study after study to be true from biology to the social sciences, is that the Pareto principle exists and is real, and that 20% of your customers are generating 80% of your revenue. And so digging into your CRM, finding those 20%, finding out the value that they generate, and then finding out what it is that you need to do to target them is key. Now we know that not everyone has CRMs. You can use your CRM. You can use other sales data as a proxy for your expected value. They're not going to work as well, but something is better than nothing. And so using that average value of a customer can be used as a proxy value if you can't quite get at the true expected value. Now I've talked about game theory. We've talked about CRMs, expected values. How does this all fit together? And this is where the Agile approach comes in. And using the Agile approach, mixing it with game theory and other analytical tools to, like Luciano was saying, not be looking in the review mirror. When you look at your dashboards, when you're doing A/B testing, you're looking behind. And it's good to look behind to get a good understanding of where you're at. But from that point, you need to start looking forward so you can start being that, like we said, that agent of change, someone who's actually taking the market and making it fit for what they need. And that's where Agile research will come in, because you can start, solving little questions, solving some problems, coming back after 2 weeks, rehashing it out, taking this new information, building on your knowledge base, and saying, okay, now we got to figure out this. And as you start building that knowledge base, you're able to start building your strategies, analyzing the different strategies, analyzing what your competitors are doing, and being able to synthesize all that into one good strategy for your company. And the Agile approach is so important because traditional market research, you go in, you have a problem, 6 months later, you get an answer, and that answer is outdated. And that answer is not, it's outdated, and it's going to become heavily outdated in the near future. And so Agile research, you're taking 2-week steps, making sure you're acting on the data as fast as possible, and then continuing ahead. It's also allowing you to stay one step ahead of your customer, because as soon as you react, we know from life and from game theory that people, when someone makes a change, they're going to change how they act, and so you need to always be analyzing and making sure you are one step ahead of your customers, not your customers, your competitors. So what we're going to talk about, I'm going to turn over the time to Savannah from iFreedom. She's going to talk about how iFreedom has applied this Agile approach into handling their AdWords.
Hey everyone, my name is Savannah Patterson. I'm the Business Intelligence Analyst at iFreedom Direct. I mainly focus on mining and analyzing data to determine the effectiveness of our marketing campaigns, and I provide recommendations on where we should allocate our monthly marketing budget to get the highest ROI on our lead gen. Just a brief history of our company. iFreedom Direct is a mortgage lender, and we're specifically focused on providing loans to the military community. We offer a unique financial product, which is a government-backed loan, and it's insured through the VA, and it's available to eligible military veterans and active duty servicemen. The VA offers an exclusive loan product for these members that has 100% financing and no mortgage insurance. Compared to the whole home lending industry as a whole, the VA loan market is a very small niche of that we compete in. Our business model is focused around a call center. So we currently have about 100 loan officers originating loans and about 80 call center representatives. The marketing team is solely responsible for generating leads for our sales force, and once we generate a lead, we contact them, make sure they're interested, and then hand them off as an opportunity to our loan officers. Since 1996, we've done over 100,000 loans, and we're a top-ranked lender nationally. For our AdWords campaign, like Luciano mentioned at the beginning, we've had a lot of history with AdWords. We started a campaign about 10 years ago in 2006. When we were early adapters in our industry, and we were able to have very profitable campaigns with very little effort. There just wasn't a lot of people competing in our space at that time. Fast forward a few years later, and the competition dramatically increases. We start seeing some of the bigger banks that you're probably all more familiar with, and they start deciding to do business in the VA loan space. With the increase of this competition, we were finding it very difficult to generate leads at a sustainable cost, and we had lost our efficiencies. We were forced to scale back our spend, and we were just burning through money. Due to the suffering performance of our campaigns, we looked for help outside for other firms. We had a few relationships with some other firms that offered bidding software. They're pretty much just selling a one-size-fits-all algorithm for managing our bidding process, but we never had any great success with these partnerships. Most firms were just focused on getting the lowest cost per lead without quality in mind, and quality for us is very important in our business. Like I mentioned earlier, not every lead is the same, and we want to capitalize on that. So because of our success early on, we knew that there is great opportunity with AdWords. But since our space is so competitive, we know that doing a data-driven approach is the only way we'll be able to have that success again with our AdWords campaign. Otherwise, we just can't compete. This year, we plan on growing our sales force by 50%, so the pressure is really on us to deliver a high volume of leads while sustaining the quality and cost of those leads. When we're not able to generate our own leads through AdWords, we're forced to buy them from lead aggregators, which means we're buying a lead that was generated by another company for a very high premium, and these leads are usually sold multiple times to our other competitors. So generating leads ourselves through AdWords makes it so we get a more exclusive lead, a higher quality lead, and we have a lot of control over our marketing and branding on those leads. So we discovered Empertos earlier this year. We were immediately impressed of how Empertos dove right into great detail to understand our core objectives, kind of the landscape we were competing in, our competitors, and the KPIs that were really important to us. The analysts at Empertos are exceptional at creating visuals. I think you saw some of those earlier in this slideshow. And they really help our team, everyone on our team, even the less analytical people, really understand insights that they were presenting to us. And like Luciano mentioned earlier, the AdWords dashboard is a great start, but it's essentially just a spreadsheet, and doing multivariable analysis has to be done with the raw data. So we really enjoy the bi-weekly reports and meetings that we do. They constantly evaluate our KPIs and analyze performance on our recommendations. And this is kind of the agile method that was mentioned earlier, and seems to really work for a landscape that's constantly changing that you're trying to keep up with. So the next phase in our collaboration is something we're really excited about. We're going to take our optimization to the next level by incorporating data from Google's API and marrying that with our CRM data so that we can analyze conversion not just at the lead conversion, but further down in the funnel. So when a loan actually ends up funding and buying a house. So like Luciano said, not all customers are created equal, and we definitely want to capitalize on that, and this next step that we're doing will definitely help us optimize to that endpoint.
Thanks, Savannah. So at this point, we want to open it up to Q&A. If you post your question, for those who have mics, we'd love to hear it from you verbally, not just in the chat window, but if you want to post it there first, I'll give you a couple seconds to type it out. Or you can raise your hand. There is a raise your hand feature for those who aren't on their mobile device. Last call for questions. Great, that means we answered everything. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are going to post this recording so that you can go back and look at it. If you have any questions, there will be a short follow-up survey. We'd appreciate if you fill that out. The slides are attached, but if you want to have any further discussions, you can get a hold of me by email. Our phone number's here, our Twitter handle's here, and our address if you want to swing by and you're in the area in Holiday, Utah, let us know. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and good luck with your AdWords optimization.